kingdom, suffering always points to hope. It always points to hope. I'm going to start in James. James tells us that, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. So James is telling us that when we go through trials, when we go through tribulations, hey April, when we go through trials, when we go through tribulations, that he is with us. I have another translation which I think says it better. It says, whenever trouble comes our way, let it be an opportunity for joy. When your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be strong in character and ready for anything. We live in a world, everyone suffers in this world. Everyone suffers in this world. Believers and non-believers, the people walking through here, it's how we deal with it. It's how that we move forward in our suffering that makes us different as Christians. When we suffer, we should suffer differently than the rest of the world. Just as James told us, when we suffer, we should look at it as an opportunity to rejoice. There's a couple things that we can learn about when we suffer. The first is that growth comes with affliction and suffering. So when we are suffering, that's probably the time that we're grown the most, that we experience transformation the most. Suffering also promotes spiritual maturity. A lot of times when we suffer, God will always, if we're Christian, when we suffer, we always turn to God. We say, God, help me. Get me through this time that I'm going through. It's very easy when things are going right, when everything's going right and we're happy, to kind of forget about the man in the sky, to kind of forget about what's going on, how God has provided things for us. When things are going well and we're provided for, we often forget to thank God. We often forget to tell him, thank you for how good our life is. And when things go bad, we instantly turn to him and say, God, I need your help. So God sometimes uses suffering to bring us back to him, to reinforce that relationship with him. I've been meditating on a quote for about a month and a half now. There's a manager for a baseball team who, the Baltimore Orioles, his team was down. He was in the playoffs, early in the playoffs, and his team was down by a bunch of games. Actually, they were down all season. And he said that there was a quote that his mom always used to say to him, where the first part is probably familiar to a lot, but the second part is what I really like. He goes, God doesn't put us through things that he knows we can't get through. God doesn't put us through things that he knows we can't get through. The second part of it is, we just wish God didn't have so much confidence in us. God has a lot of confidence in us, and when he puts us through trials, when he puts us through tribulations, it shows his confidence in us. It shows that he believes in us and that he can get us through it. Daryl, come on, man. We've been studying the book of Genesis. We just actually finished the book of Genesis yesterday. And a lot of the book of Genesis focuses on the story of Joseph. And Joseph is somebody that God had a lot of confidence in, that he suffered a lot. And it's not because God wanted him to put it through suffering, but I think he knew that Joseph, the way Joseph was going to react in his suffering. And that we see that in the end, Joseph came out ahead. Joseph, just to go recap his story, and Ruth, you were there, we talked about it yesterday, where Joseph was the second He was the 11th of 12 brothers, so he was the second youngest. And at a young age, he had a dream that basically he was going to be better than all of his brothers, and better than all of his family. And so his brothers got really, really jealous and sold him into slavery. While in slavery, he was accused of raping a woman, which he didn't do, so they put him in prison. So, sold into slavery, accused of rape, which he didn't do, put into prison. While in prison, he interprets a couple guys' dreams that get them out of prison. And in return, Joseph said, if I interpret your dreams, will you tell the Pharaoh that I'm down in prison and that I want to get out? And when he interprets their dreams, they get out of prison, or one gets out of prison, the other one, I think, dies. And the guy that gets out of prison forgets about him. And finally, the Pharaoh has these dreams, and Joseph is called. It gets relayed to the Pharaoh that Joseph can interpret dreams. So Joseph interprets the Pharaoh's dreams and basically interprets it as saying that you're going to have 7 years of prosperity with the land, 7 years of good harvest, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine. So during your 7 years of prosperity, you need to save up for the 7 years of famine. And so the Pharaoh does this, and he promotes Joseph to the number 2 in all the land of Egypt. And at the end of the book, we see Joseph, his brothers come to him, and his dad, Joseph's dad, and his brother's dad just died. And his brothers are really afraid that Joseph is going to extract revenge on them for selling him into slavery. And Joseph says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." So what Joseph is saying here is that, man, you guys, what you meant for evil, selling me into slavery, it was wrong what you guys did. But what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And I kind of think about that way with our suffering, the suffering that Joseph goes through. When we look at our suffering, we have to look at how it's refining us. Why is God putting through this? Why is God putting us through this? Another verse is Romans 8:28, where it says, "And we know that for all those who love God, all things, not some things, all things work together for good, and for those who are called according to his purpose." Like I said earlier, if you look back on your life and you look at the times of greatest transformation, of greatest growth, it didn't come when you were the most happy. I guarantee you it came the time when you were being tried the most, when you were going through the most tribulation,